Hey guys, welcome back for another lecture in SH100 Principles of Public Speaking. In this video we're going to go over Chapter 7, which is about delivering your speeches and exceptional delivery practices, if you will. Things that we're going to look for, things that you guys should consider as you deliver your speeches. You have delivered speeches to me already, but this goes over a little bit more in depth the things that we're looking for and things you should consider when you're giving your speeches and the delivery practices you should be using. We're going to go over speech types. We're going to go over some different facets of speaking. We're also going to go over some different body language cues and things like that so you guys know what to do in sort of every public speaking situation. We're going to go over some speech types first. And again, we've been over these before, but we're going to go over them a little bit more in depth right now. There's 4 speaking methods, obviously. The first one is a manuscript. You guys have done this. That is when you write down word for word what you want to say, type that out. You don't stray from that script, okay? You're reading off the page. You're good to go. All right, everything is typed out and ready for you to read. Again, so we've discussed that before. There's also memorized delivery, okay? So we don't do that in this course. Remember, that's actors reading lines. They just memorize the lines. They don't stray from those lines. They just read them off from their minds. They're not reading any papers or anything, but they're just pulling them from their heads. They memorize the speech word for word and don't stray from those words. Again, actors memorizing lines. Then there's impromptu. Again, we're not doing that in this course, but that doesn't allow you very much planning at all. In my other courses that I teach on campus, I ask students to pull a topic out of a hat. They have 5 minutes to prep, and then they speak on it after that 5 minutes. In some circumstances, you won't even have time for that much preparation. So if you want an award and need to speak or give a speech on that award for having won that award, an acceptance speech, you won't even have that much time to prepare. So again, impromptu doesn't allow you much prep time. You got to think on your feet. You got to be ready to go at a moment's notice. Okay, but we don't do that in the online course. What we do for the rest of your speeches, other than your intro speech, is extemporaneous or outline speeches. Again, the best style. It allows you to be organic with your audience and dynamic and all of those things. You include some information on your outline. The rest is sort of ad lib. So again, you just bring in information from the outline, but you also pull information from your head and you read your audience. And it's just kind of the best method of public speaking that you can do. And there's disadvantages and advantages to both of those methods, or all 4 of those methods, really. So think about those as you go through this course of what advantages this method has over another one. Okay, think especially in terms of what advantages the outline has over the manuscript, because those are the ones that you guys are actually doing. Okay, so again, that's just kind of a review. But there's other things that we look for when we are delivering speeches, and I will critique you guys on these in your feedback from your speeches if you want to see that. But there are several aspects that we look to sort of determine, wow, this is a really good public speaker, or this is sort of someone who needs some work, someone who needs to work on some different aspects. But the first one is rate, okay? The rate at which you speak is just how fast you talk, all right? The speed at which you speak, and you want to adjust that frequently, okay? You can start talking really quickly to build up excitement. If you get really excited and really into something and start talking about it really, really fast, and you start going on and on and on, right, that builds excitement, okay? If you slow down, take some pauses, you start talking a little more slowly, that tones it down a little bit. That adds a little bit more somber or thought-provoking aspect to it. It allows more time for processing. So again, you need to adjust that rate pretty frequently depending on your speech situation, but it should still fit your time frame. If you're given a time frame, you need to make sure that your vocal rate reflects that time frame, okay? So adjust that as needed. Pauses are also really important. They can have a great effect on your audience. You want to pause after you ask them a question, or if there's something dramatic that you say, give it a minute to sort of digest, let them think about it for a minute, and then continue talking. If you do ask them the question, give them time to think about it and answer it in their head. especially if it's kind of like a rhetorical question. If it's a poll, you know, they'll give you an answer automatically. They'll raise their hand or whatever to give you an answer. But you can pause to get a main point across as well. So if you say something really profound, again, give it a pause, let it sink in, then move on. Okay, so those pauses can be really good. They can also be used for transitions. So if there's a clear pause in between your sections, especially your body paragraphs, that's an indicator that you're moving on. All right, so if it is a pause in between all your paragraphs, so your intro, your bodies, and your conclusion, that again can sort of transition between the 5 or however many of those paragraphs you have to indicate that you're moving forward to a different point. Okay, so pauses can be really important as well. Now there are the pauses that aren't so intentional. If you stumble or get lost or lose your place, that kind of thing, but you can recover from those, and we'll sort of work on those as we move through the course. That's one of the things that we're going to be working on, is how to avoid those and how to move forward even if you do stumble. I took piano lessons when I was younger, and my teacher was always telling me I had a really bad habit of, if I were to mess up, I would stop at that point and then start again. My piano instructor was like, look, no one in the audience really knows that you've messed up except for you. So if you stop where you mess up, then they're going to know. But if you just keep rolling with it and roll right over that hiccup, then no one knows you even messed up. So that's kind of the philosophy we want to use in public speaking as well. If you do stumble over a word, or you do sort of have to pause for a second, just keep going. Just roll with it, okay? You don't need to sort of make that pause anything greater than it has to be. It will help you collect your thoughts, but again, you want to make it seem flawless. You want to just keep moving forward. Don't let it make you stumble. All right, so there's good pauses and there's bad pauses, intentional ones and unintentional ones, and we want to focus on the intentional ones more than the unintentional ones. But again, it happens to everyone, so you want to make sure that if that does happen, that you are able to move past it. All right. Next is duration. Again, duration is just how long the speech lasts, kind of your time limit situation. It's how long the speech itself lasts, okay? So if you have a 30-minute block that you need to speak in, you need to stick to that 30 minutes. You don't need to be way under or way over. That's going to throw off the schedule. People are going to start getting antsy, you know, that kind of thing. So you want to have a strict time limit. If you have a strict time limit, you need to stick to it, okay? Duration also deals with how long certain parts of the speech last, okay? So we talked about this in earlier lectures, that sort of parallelism, sort of similarity between your paragraphs, especially your body paragraphs. You want them to be similar, maybe not exactly the same, but similar in length and in tone and in structure, so that they're all fairly consistent as you go throughout the speech. And also, duration has to do with certain sounds. Now, here in the South, people say that we talk really slow, and that we draw out our words a little bit more than, say, someone in other parts of the country. Well, that's okay. Some people have really deep, thick draws, southern draws. Some people don't have one at all. I think I'm a little bit in between. But you know how long you talk, right? You know how you talk. You know the kind of accent you have. You know how long it takes you to say certain words. And that can throw you off. So make sure that, again, you know how to use your accent and your specific speech mannerisms in a way that is effective in your time frame. Okay? You want to make sure to time yourself and practice if you get a chance to. So again, you're able to see how long it takes you to actually get through your speech. Okay? So the duration and those time limits are very important. Okay? The next is rhythm. Okay? So if any of you are musical, right, this will make sense to you guys. It's the tempo of the speech, okay? It is how it moves, all right, how it flows, all right? So you want to try to change that. So maybe start off slow, all right? Pick it up as it gets more exciting, and then maybe tone it back down toward the end. If you've ever studied Shakespeare, he does this thing where all of his plays are broken up into 5 different sections, all right? The introduction sort of starts off kind of slow, introduces characters, that kind of thing. Then we go into something that's called the rising action, okay? So the tempo is starting to build. We're getting some plot, right? We're getting some problems starting to develop. Okay, so again, it starts off slow, sort of gets a little faster, a little more build up here. So maybe that's your first body paragraph, okay? First and second body paragraph in this rising action. Then you get to your middle section, So we're going to call that the climax, or maybe the apex, the climax. It's up here. Think of this as a curve, right? So your climax is where everything happens. It's your most exciting point. In Shakespeare's plays, it's where all hell breaks loose, essentially. The big plot point happens. Usually in that case, someone dies. But it's where the most exciting part happens. And in our speeches, that's generally going to be sort of our main points, our body points. Probably second or third, probably your third, because we want your third one to be your strongest, right? So that's kind of our kicker. All right, so we're going to think about it that way. Then after you say that and we start getting toward our conclusion, we go into falling action, where it's like we've just come off of that really big point. We're going into the conclusion, right? And then it stops over here on the other end of the curve where your conclusion and sort of your kicker happen, okay? The why it matters point, okay? So if you follow that structure, it kind of makes sense. You want to start off slow, get more exciting, and then, finish out slow, okay? Because again, that helps your audience process the information. It makes sure that you get their attention in that main body point, and then it lets them close out kind of on an easy note. But that's your rhythm, okay? I know that's kind of a weird, convoluted example. You think about it in terms of music, too. So you start off kind of slow, you get the beat, you get the melody, that kind of thing. Then you get to the chorus, and it's really big, and then you sort of fall out again back on that melodic situation. So it makes sense in a lot of different ways in literature and music, but it works also in public speaking. You want that build up, okay? So you want to start off slow, excitement, slow it back down, okay? So that's your rhythm. And it's just, again, how the speech flows. It's the tempo, so the sort of beat of the speech, if you will. Pitch is next. It's the highness or lowness of your speaker's voice. Vary your pitch to avoid sounding monotone. You don't ever want to sound monotone. You always want to kind of adjust your pitch. So sometimes I go higher when I want to emphasize some things, and I'll go lower when I want to sort of bring it back down. You see how that works? I talk about this, but then I talk about this, right? So the pitch fluctuates. You want to make sure that you're not sounding monotone, because if you're sounding monotone, nobody wants to listen to you, and then the speech is going to sound really monotonous and boring, and no one wants to focus on that, and they're going to fall asleep. We don't want what I just did, right? Because again, no one really wants to listen to that. But you want to have your vocal variety in there. You want to make sure you vary the way you talk. That can reflect the mood of the speech. So talking really high up can mean sort of happy, perky, exciting. Talking down low can mean kind of sad, kind of depressed, that kind of thing. So you want to make sure that you vary that, because they can show emotion even just with those vocal tones. So use that to your advantage. Volume is our next aspect, but it works kind of the same way. It's the loudness or softness of your voice. So if you're talking really loud and exciting, right, that can bring in a lot of excitement to the speech. You want to project your voice, all right? You want to make sure that everyone in the room can hear it. For that aspect, you want to make sure that you're projecting it to every aspect of the room. You're throwing your voice to all the areas of the room. And again, that shows excitement. And that shows you sort of own the room at that point. So you want to make sure that you're able to do that. Same thing, if you bring it down, maybe you're kind of sad. You don't want to talk. It's really emotional. Right, you bring down your tone, and it shows a completely different side of public speaking, right? It's not as exciting and boisterous. It's more somber and depressed, for lack of a better word. But again, it depends on your audience. It depends on the mood and the purpose for your speech. So again, use that wisely. Last is enunciation and fluency, which kind of work together but are two different kind of things. Enunciation is how you articulate your words. You want to make sure that you're pronouncing your words correctly. You want to make sure that you're saying them correctly, and that you're focusing on all the syllables. You're not leaving out any letters or anything like that. It's how we make sounds and what sounds we make and how we use those together. So we want to make sure that the audience knows what we're saying and that we're saying it correctly. Because again, credibility, want to make sure that we're using words correctly. So enunciate your words. When you speak, a lot of times we use slang and have these really weird sort of accents and twangs, and we may not use all of our syllables correctly, but you want to make sure that you're doing that as much as possible when you speak. And then the last one is fluency. It's the smoothness of delivery. It's the flow of the words and sort of that absence of those accidental pauses that we discussed earlier. You want to make sure that it's as fluid as possible. And your confidence level will sort of improve your fluency. The more confident you are, or the more that you've rehearsed, or the more that you've practiced, that fluency will get better. And our goal is sort of perfect fluency. Like we talked about earlier, if you do have a pause, roll over it and keep going. Or if you do have a stumble, roll over it, keep going. You want to make it flow as smoothly as possible. If you've ever seen a TED Talk, those are sort of really awesome public speakers talking on a huge variety of aspects. It used to be technology, engineering, and design. Now it's moved into several other facets of science and knowledge and academia and that kind of thing. They are very fluid when they speak. They don't have any noticeable accidental pauses. They don't stumble on their words. They are very adequate and efficient and proficient speakers. So I encourage you, if you want to sort of aspire to be a public speaker, look at those TED Talks, because that will give you really good inspiration for what you need to aspire to be, because they're usually spot on. But they're very fluid. They're very fluent in what they say. They flow really well. So again, I encourage you to watch some of those if you haven't before. So those voice aspects, again, are very important in all of those speech styles. We want to make sure that you're using all of those rate, pause, duration, rhythm, pitch, volume, enunciation, and fluency. All of those things kind of come together, and it's a lot to think about, when you're up there talking, and you probably don't think about those. But if you can take those into consideration while you're preparing your speech, while you're practicing your speech, all of that should come full circle and should work out pretty well for you in your speech. So use those to your advantage when you can, and when you have time to prep, take those into consideration. So that's using your voice, but we also talk about your body language. Again, you guys know I move my hands a lot. I just talk with my hands. I'm sorry. I'm unapologetic for it, even though I just apologized. But you can use your body to help deliver your speech as well, and you do that in several ways. One is eye contact. Again, you want to make sure you're making eye contact with your audience. I'm making eye contact with this camera right now, but I'm looking you guys straight in the eye because I'm doing it, right? So again, that eye contact is really important. It's important to make eye contact with your audience because they want to feel engaged. You're able to tell if they're engaged with you or not by looking at them. Again, you don't want to stare at them for too long because that makes people uncomfortable. Move it around the room a little bit. You just want to make sure that you're sort of engaging with as many people as possible. Because again, think about the preacher in church, right? So if you've ever been to a church service and maybe you didn't have a great week, right? And the preacher's up there talking about something, and he's just staring right at you. Right, he's sending that message straight to you. That eye contact makes all the difference in the world, right? Because it's like, man, that message was meant for me. That sermon was meant for me. So again, that eye contact can be really beneficial and really important. So again, use that when you can. Your facial expressions are really important as well. Your face can say a lot without you actually saying anything. And it shows in your eyes, your eyebrows, the wrinkles in your forehead, this big vein I have in my forehead right here, and the way your mouth works. Your eyes show a lot of emotion, your eyebrows move when you speak. So again, all of that can kind of be really telling about your mood and about your attitude while you speak. So you want your facial expressions to reflect your speech. Now, some people have what we call RBF, which is resting bitch face, and that's okay. Some people just have sort of those sullen facial expressions. Some people are naturally happy looking all the time. I don't think I'm one of those people. But you need to know about yourself so you can, again, adjust that based on your audience, okay? If you're saying something really upbeat and happy, but your face kind of doesn't look that way, right, you can tell it's not real, and we want it to be as real as possible. Okay, so think about your facial expressions. Next, appropriate for me, are hand and body gestures, okay? So motions used for emphasis of your main points. I use my hands all the time. I count off on them for main points. So this, and this, right? We want to focus on this, not so much on this, right? It's high or it's low, all right? It's over here, it's over here, it's up here, it's down here, right? All of those different hand movements help add emphasis, okay? I just did it again. They add emphasis, right? I can't help myself. But those hand and body gestures are beneficial because, again, it gives your hand something to do, because a lot of times we don't know what to do with our hands when we're up here behind a podium. But it also can help your audience. You know, it gives a sense of direction, gives a sense of movement and motion, and that kind of thing. It's not as stagnant. All right, so those can be used to your advantage as well. The same thing with your bodily movement. All right, so you can walk around the room. You can get sort of close to your audience if you want to, sort of some more interpersonal communication type things. You can move closer to them or farther away from them. You can move in about them if you're in sort of a classroom or in a boardroom. You can walk around the table. Anything that sort of keeps it moving, all right? You don't want to stand up there just in one spot and just read off a page and be boring, right? We don't want that. That's not dynamic. There's that dynamism word that we're using again. Keeping it dynamic, keeping it moving is really important. So again, you can use your hand movements and body movements and facial expressions and all of those things to sort of help add emphasis and add excitement to your speech. And the last one is your appearance. The appearance depends on the occasion. Clearly, again, I'm back in a t-shirt, so the occasion is very different here. This is a very casual kind of conversation we're having. But if I were in a boardroom, I would want to be dressed to the nines and dressed appropriately for the other people in the boardroom. If I were in a classroom, same thing. I don't want to be dressed so that my students or fellow peers would respect me in that situation. If I were speaking at a wedding, again, the wedding will dictate how you dress. Funerals, same kind of thing. Graduations, same kind of thing. If you're at a party and you're giving a toast, depending on the theme of the party, you'll be dressed a certain way. So your appearance just kind of depends on, again, the speaking situation or the occasion, right? And the formality of that occasion. So again, that can make all the difference in the world too on how people view you and your credibility in that speaking situation. So all those things can be used in terms of your body to, again, help add emphasis and help add excitement or appropriateness to your speech. Okay, so use those to your advantage. And the last thing we're going to talk about, which we haven't necessarily talked about a whole lot yet, is listening. All right. A lot of times we listen to respond and not to comprehend. Okay, and that's a very profound kind of statement. But listening to respond is very different than listening to comprehend. We want to make sure that it needs a response. Sometimes things people say don't actually need a verbal response, and we're just quick to jump and say, oh, yeah, whatever, yeah. It doesn't necessarily need that. Okay, so we're going to talk about active listening. You want to listen with your presence, okay? If you're in a room listening to someone speak, all right, you have a presence in that room. They're going to look at you. You're part of their audience. They're there to examine you, do all those things we talked about in Chapter 4, where they analyze the audience, right? The speaker is going to be analyzing you, all right, as a member of that audience. So you want to make sure you establish eye contact with that person. You want to make sure that you let them know that you hear them, okay? So that sort of affirmation, right? That feedback, so nodding your head, giving, clapping when it's necessary, that kind of thing. Not falling asleep, not texting. You want good positive affirmation and feedback that you are an active listener, okay? You want to listen with an open mind, right? You want to hear their point of view, especially if that point of view is not necessarily your same point of view that you hold. If it's different, you want to make sure that you're listening to them and be open-minded. You know, that's one of the best things we can do is listen to other people and other opinions and other ideas. So make sure you listen with an open mind. You want to make sure you get the main ideas or the gist of the speech, so make sure that you understand what their points were. If you need any clarification, you can always ask questions at the end, either one-on-one with the speaker, or if there's a Q&A time, you can ask them questions as well. Again, that shows that you were at least listening, right, and that you have some kind of question to ask them. Okay, so make sure that you do that if it's warranted, if it's necessary. You also want to listen critically, not critically as in mean or malicious. You want to listen critically as in, do they sound credible? The things they say make sense. Again, it goes back to that whole ethos and logos thing. Were they an ethical speaker? Did they use logical information? to present information to you as an audience member. Okay. You can critique them. You can be critical of them, and they shouldn't be offended at that. You have a right as that audience member to be critical of the speaker, and you always should be critical of the speaker, regardless of who it is, regardless of their credibility. But again, if it's warranted, again, you can ask questions for more clarification, ask for some credentials, that kind of thing, if it's questionable. All right. And then lastly, you want to listen with your heart. We all kind of get nervous in public speaking situations, even I do to this day. They're probably feeling that same kind of pressure that you would feel if you were up there. So again, be open-minded, encourage them, don't be malicious, don't go in there and be bored or apathetic. Again, encourage them as much as possible. Smile. If they look at you and make eye contact with you, smile, and give them some positive affirmation that you support them. Because again, public speaking is hard for everyone. So to get up there in front of an audience and speak takes a lot of guts. So again, be encouraging, because you would want that same encouragement from them if it were you in those shoes. All right. Not all communication needs a verbal response. So again, it goes back to that listening to respond versus comprehend. We want to listen more to comprehend than we do to respond. We can respond, especially if we have something profound to give back or some other insights to provide. But if we don't have anything useful to say, let's not say it. Okay? That's part of active listening, is kind of knowing when to respond and when not to. Okay? So that covers delivery. And again, you guys have delivered speeches already, so you should have done 2 at this point. But again, this goes a little bit more in depth into the specific aspects that can be critiqued about a speech, specific aspects that you can think about when you're practicing and sort of work on to make sure that you're doing them as effectively as possible. It's a lot to think about in just the grand scheme of giving a speech. But if you are practicing and you are preparing your outlines and things like we're supposed to, take these into consideration, because they're things that I'm looking for and that I will sort of judge you guys on. So make sure that you're using these to your advantage. These notes will be posted, are posted on Blackboard. So make sure that you look these over and look at those lists again to make sure you're using all those things effectively. Up next will be Chapter 8. I will post that video soon, so be on the lookout. Thanks.